Hello, I am Crystal Kirkendall, editor at THE Journal, and I am the host of THE Journal Insider Podcast, where we talk about K-12 EdTech solutions and trends and hacks for educators and administrators. I am here today with Scott Murray. He is superintendent at Ector County Independent School District in Odessa, Texas. They have 33,500 students at 44 different campuses. Sounds like a very big job, Scott. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Big job, but a lot of fun.
Cool. So we were talking previously a little bit about tutoring, and I've learned some things about the Texas passing a law requiring tutoring for certain grades, and that's why you're here today, because I wanted to hear from your perspective. You have some interesting experiences to share about the different tutoring providers that you all have used and just the differences in them. And so I want to start off, let's talk about the law and share with people outside of Texas who may not be familiar with it, the new state law requiring tutoring to be provided for certain students falling below grade levels on state assessment. So can you tell me about the law and what it says?
Sure. The law is House Bill 4545, and it really calls for acceleration. Tutoring is one of the options that school districts can utilize, but there are other options. What's important is that the students have 30 hours in a school year. And that is for any tested area. So mathematics, reading, ELA, science and social studies. So those four core academic areas. If a student was not successful in the state assessment, then 30 hours per area in which they were not successful. So some kids could have a lot of acceleration opportunities in a year if they were not successful in a variety of areas.
Right. And so that can add up. And so how are you guys, when you all started deciding to use tutoring, and you tell me what it looks like, where you're implementing it as far as in the school day and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so the law applies to kindergarten, really third grade through 12th grade students that would take state assessments. From a research perspective, one-on-one tutoring is the most effective form of acceleration. And obviously that's what we wanted for our kids. There are other interventions that we could have utilized, but that's the one we're after. We quickly realized, however, that we don't have enough adults in our community to provide the kind of tutoring that we needed to provide for students. And so we quickly went to the virtual world and discovered that there's a whole plethora of, and continue to emerge, vendors, companies that are providing virtual tutoring that looks in a variety of different ways, leveraging people from around the world to bring those services really down to the classroom. And so back in the spring of 2020, we started with a group of 40 middle school students and a virtual tutoring vendor. And we wanted to pilot this first to see if it was effective. At the end of that first year, we had quite a bit of success with those 40 kids. And so we scaled it from 40 to 6,000 over a summer. Yeah. And now we provide tutoring to kindergarten through 12th grade students, not only students that are part of House Bill 4545, but just kids that need a little bit of extra support. And all of our tutoring that's a part of 4545 is virtual. So we work with 4 different virtual tutoring companies. They all look and feel different, and we've matched those over time with the needs of kids. So, yep.
Awesome. And so previously you had mentioned that for our audience, we attempted to do this a week ago, and my internet quit working because we had snow. So we're doing this over. I want to hear I want to share with the audience in particular about just the different formats for the virtual tutoring and how you guys found that older kids do better with certain styles and communication methods, I guess, that the tutoring providers use.
Yeah. So as we did the research on tutoring and looking at different companies, we discovered that, again, not all companies deliver tutoring in the same way or even using the same type of tutors. Some tutors are college age students. Some tutors are certified licensed teachers. Some tutors come from places around the world. Some tutors are located in specific parts of the country. And then the way they deliver their service. Some Tutoring providers are face-to-face, and so there's a virtual, much like you and I right now, can see each other. Other tutors are chat-based. And so a lot of really good learning from us. And we made some good discoveries. One is that our high school students prefer a chat-based tutoring session versus our elementary students that prefer face-to-face. And so the elementary kids want to see their tutor and develop that connection. High school kids were not as interested in seeing the person. They were much more interested in chat-based tutoring sessions. And so we have tailored the different companies that we work with based upon the needs of our students. And then we also learned from a best practice perspective, tutoring just isn't something that you give to kids and hope for the best. We discovered that there are some characteristics that go into making sure that tutoring is effective. So one is the tutoring companies are required to use our curriculum. And so that is important. We require that the tutors are professionally trained. You need to do more than just hire somebody who says they know how to tutor. You need to make sure that the tutors are trained in tutoring children specifically. They need to have a connection with the teacher. And so our tutors connect with our teachers and engage in conversations about students. We have an MOU with all of our tutoring companies that allow them to have access to student data. And so we're a district that uses the NWEA MAP assessment. And we give all of that assessment information to the tutors themselves so they have a better indication of the specific needs that kids have using, again, the curriculum that we're utilizing within our own environment. It needs to be structured. You discover quickly that just because you give kids tutoring doesn't mean they're going to actually participate. And so we've had to create very structured tutoring environments. We embed it into the school day. An adult is in the environment to ensure that the elementary, middle school, and high school kids are fully engaged in the tutoring session. So there are best practices that school districts need to utilize to make sure that it is effective for kids.
And so I just want to back up for a second. These
Sure.
the best practices that you mentioned, I mean, I've seen a whole lot of information on tutoring and what makes tutoring work better and those sorts of things. Did the Texas Education Association that sort of oversees this, did they give you guys some best practices, or were they pretty broad and you not narrowed them down a lot during your implementation early days?
Yeah. So the Texas House Bill 4545 is all about 30 hours per kid. That's really as much as the law defines. The interventions are things that are more school defined. And there are, unfortunately, some environments in which they're just assigning a kid 30 hours and hoping for the best. And that is not proving to be effective. The Texas Education Agency has provided some guidance, which certainly helps school districts utilize it, but there is no requirement to follow that particular guidance. These are just recommendations. At the local district level, that's where we've discovered not only is the TEA guidance helpful to us, but we have our own set of guidance as well that we utilize across our system to ensure effectiveness. It doesn't do any good if we're paying this money for tutoring and we don't follow the guidance, because the money is not well spent. And then the time is not, the investment of time doesn't prove to be effective for the kid. And the whole purpose of this is so that children will accelerate their learning and overcome the challenges of the pandemic. And if they're not engaged in an effective situation, then it's all for naught. And that's not
Right.
something we're willing to do.
Probably very counterproductive to the student if they try any at all on the tutoring. Right.
That's exactly right. Well, it turns into more homework help. And
Right.
homework help is not tutoring. That's homework help.
Can you explain, if you're talking to someone who knows nothing about tutoring, how would you differentiate homework help versus the kind of tutoring that you guys are using?
Yeah. So homework help would be, little Johnny has a question about a math problem that that he's completing for homework. And so the tutor helps little Johnny with that specific question and asks, little Johnny, do you have any other questions about the homework that you're doing? And so that it's as simple as helping kids with their assignments. Tutoring, our tutors, again, use the curriculum that we are using as a school system. They have specific data points using the MAP assessment. The tutor is able to pinpoint very specific academic needs of the student, Texas state standards that kids have not mastered yet. And so the tutoring is very targeted. It's equipping the students with the skills and abilities necessary to master a very specific standard. So not helping them with their homework. We're focused on a mini lesson, if you will, that's targeted to a Texas academic standard.
Okay. And so when a tutoring session begins, let's say middle school or high school, and they're going into their tutoring session during the school day, how does the tutor know what to work on? Is it something, do they have a list of things from like weak areas in the map growth results, or is it something that the teacher said, this is the stuff we're working on this week or this month? And you can tell by his map scores that Johnny needs help on this particular part. How does that work?
Yeah, there's a tutoring plan for every kid. That's part of the conversation between the tutor, the teacher, and sometimes the student is engaged in that process as well. But it's all driven by data. Specifically, the map data helps us know and understand the strengths of the child, but again, very specific standards, academic standards that the child has not mastered. And then the tutor focuses upon those standards only, not the ones that the kid has demonstrated success, but the ones that the child needs to work on, again, that are in alignment with the curriculum and that we're using as a school system. So the collaboration between teacher and tutor is critical.
Okay. And is there sort of a meeting format, or the teacher and the tutor speak once at the beginning of the year or once a month? How does that work?
So a plan is developed at the beginning. In that conversation, you're developing kind of a long range plan for the student. Communication can vary depending upon the tutoring company that we're using. Each of the companies kind of have designed their own communication mechanisms that allow the teacher to engage. Sometimes it is very direct and face to face. Other times it could just be a more text based information sharing between teacher and tutor.
Right. Okay. Great. And so the TEA they vetted tutoring providers. And so
They
there's
did.
a
Mhm.
list on the Texas Education Association website of veteran tutoring providers, and it lists a few things by each one, like what kind of things they offer and what the format of the tutoring is and that sort of thing. Can you talk to me a little bit about when this list came out? Was all your tutoring providers that you use now, were they all already in place, or did that list prove helpful to you? And how helpful do you think it would be to a district that's not implemented tutoring at all yet?
Yeah, so we had started this process before the list was created. And so we did our own vetting and found our own tutors as our program was a bit early. But the list itself is helpful to any district because it certainly alleviates a pretty time consuming step in the RFP creation process. And so I really commend TEA for developing that for school districts. You are not required to use tutors that are on the approved list. You can certainly find and vet tutoring companies of your own, but that process certainly helps school districts accelerate their own use of tutoring companies. So yes, helpful, yes. But our vendors, not all of them were on there because not all of them submitted to be on the vetted list. So.
Right. And so can you tell me which vendors you guys are using now, and for which grade levels or subjects?
Yeah, I can give you three of those that come to top line. So FEV Tutor is one of the vendors that we use, and primarily secondary students. They're text-based, and our secondary, middle school, and high school students prefer that environment. Air Tutors is another. They have another large presence in our organization, primarily at the elementary level. Air Tutors is video based, and so kids are able to see and engage in conversations with their tutors. And our elementary kids, again, prefer that environment. Amplify is another company that we're using, also very focused for us at the elementary level.
Okay, great. That's very helpful. And so you mentioned that all of the students have access to it, not just the ones who are required Is that all your students district wide, or just certain grades or
Yeah, no,
subjects?
not every student has access to it. Tutoring, this may sound strange, but tutoring isn't the right strategy, acceleration strategy for every child. It's kind of like the tutoring vendors. Some kids prefer text-based, some video. Well, some students prefer another type of intervention. We have 6,000 students that are participating in virtual tutoring, but we have other students participating in other types of interventions throughout the organization. In fact, some of our kids, they have extra time with their classroom teacher. And so their intervention comes directly from the teacher himself or herself. And so just an example of another type of intervention. But 6,000 virtual tutor.
Okay, got it. Let's see here. And then can you mentioned that you have seen really good results, and you referenced the trial 40 kit students that you first. Can you talk to me about the results that you saw from that trial run, and then what you've seen so far now that you've implemented it for the 6,000 students?
Yeah, so the results were very healthy. I mean, in some cases, over 2 years worth of growth. We expect in education, if you spend a year in the classroom, you should have a year's worth of growth. And we were seeing spend a year in the classroom, get 2 years worth of growth. And so, double the amount of growth. That was exciting. Those results were exciting for us. And so we took that and went from 40 to 6,000. Again, good learning says that the reason growth happens at an accelerated rate is because of the structured environment that we've created. Simply giving these hours to kids and asking them to do it on their own does not yield the kind of results that we get with kids. But another interesting piece that we put in place, which has proven to be helpful, is an outcomes-based contract. And so one of the things that we did with each of our vendors is to design a contract with them that pays them based upon the growth, the academic growth of students. And so if students are growing a year and a half, a 2 year, 2.5 years, if that is their rate of growth in a given year, then those tutoring companies make more money. But if the students are not growing, that's when the companies do not make money on those kids. So the outcomes-based contract really requires that everybody has a lot of skin in the game. The companies themselves, and then
Mhm.
we have skin in the game too. We have to make sure that we create the right type of structured environment. So highly recommend outcomes-based contracting as a way to get the greatest bang for your buck.
If there are, I'm gonna guess that tutoring providers don't offer the outcome-based contract
No,
right up
no,
front.
no, it is not something that is offered.
Not to knock on the tutoring companies, but
Oh, well,
so
it's
if a school leader is listening to this and they're like, outcome-based contracting, how do I do that? Is there a guide for that or a template somewhere?
Yeah. So if people they're absolutely welcome to reach out to me directly. We have some example RFPs that we've used, contracts that we've used with companies. And then the Southwest Regional Education Association that's based in Atlanta, they also have been a sponsor of this work, and their website contains a lot of this information as well. I will tell you the original body of work that we engaged way back in 2019, before the pandemic, was through a program at Harvard University. A small group of districts and a small group of, believe it or not, virtual tutoring vendors came together to learn about outcomes-based contracting. And then lo and behold, the pandemic arrived. And so the need for that work was magnified, 100-fold because of the pandemic. So it just so happens that we had already started down that pathway, and that allowed us to get to the place that we are today.
Awesome. I will get links for that and put that in the description on this podcast. If you
Happy
are
to.
listening and interested in that, that's where you can find it. So, do you have specific key performance indicators that the district requires or the state requires, or how does that work?
Yeah, so at the district level, it's all about student growth. We use, again, the MAP assessment to inform the tutoring process. We also use the MAP assessment to assess the success of the tutoring environment. So at the end of the year, really at mid-semester, we use the MAP data to help monitor the growth in the first semester. And then for the second half of the year, it's the same thing. That BAP assessment is the tool that we're utilizing. In addition to that, each of the tutoring companies themselves has developed a set of metrics that they monitor and report to us. We require reporting on a weekly basis. And they
Okay.
report to us everything from attendance and engagement on the part of the students to our students actually rate their tutoring experiences. So today's session was a 5. Today's session was a 1. So we see those student ratings. The tutors themselves rate the sessions so that again they tell us kind of how the kids are doing from an engagement perspective. So there are a variety of different metrics that the tutoring companies themselves have developed that help inform and improve the process. But the metric that we all agreed to that drives money, which is the payment for the tutoring, is the growth on the MAP assessment.
Okay. All right. And so have you been using it long enough to share, like, is there like an overall growth level for say the past year and a half that you've seen?
Oh yeah. So our kids are in the, probably the one that we pay attention to the most are the kids that have their 30 hours. For a variety of reasons, kids may move in out. A kid has 10 hours and then they move to a different school or a different location. But the kids that have gone through the process and been the most effective, the vast majority of those kids, I don't have a percentage with me, but I will tell you it is the vast majority of those kids have more than a year's worth of growth. So the purpose of this whole body of work is acceleration. So it is for these students to move faster so that they can ultimately catch up and maybe even get ahead of where they should have been. And so we've seen significant growth. And sometimes it is 2 or 3 years worth of growth in just 1 year from this process. So we're extremely happy with the type of growth that we're seeing.
That's phenomenal. You have given us so much information about implementing tutoring at different grade levels, and I am very grateful. I know our audience is going to be interested in hearing all of this. Is there anything else that you think that you would like to share with educators or administrators who are trying to figure out how to help their kids?
Yeah. So I think, again, tutoring based upon sound research is the most effective way to accelerate student learning. However, it must be implemented with fidelity. And so for those listening today, when you think about investing your financial resources, you want to invest in experiences and in investments that yield a positive return. And tutoring, whether face-to-face or virtual, will do that, but only if it is done right and well. And so fidelity of implementation is the way to maximize results. With this investment, which is significant, a lot of dollars are being used to purchase tutoring, but must be structured. Again, there's some great information. The Texas Education Agency has done a great job in kind of defining those criteria, but highly recommend anyone that's going to do this. It must be a highly structured environment, and all of those best practices are available.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for correcting me on my A and TEA. I always say association, but it's agency. I appreciate your time. Audience, you can find more information at thejournal.com. We will have a transcript of this interview as well and links to the resources mentioned within.